After 13 years of exposing lies in the media, I discovered the biggest lie of all. They want you to think racism is random, accidental, just bad people doing bad things. But what if I told you anti-Black racism was engineered, programmed like software, marketed like a product, and designed to survive across generations? That's exactly what I prove in my new book, Us versus the Machine, how anti-Black racism was programmed, marketed, and made to survive. This isn't another book about what racism looks like. This is the blueprint of how it was built, who profits from it, and most importantly, how to dismantle it. I spent years connecting dots that they never wanted connected, following money trails that they thought were buried, exposing the machine that runs on our oppression. Knowledge is power, but strategic knowledge is liberation. Get Us versus the Machine on Amazon today, because once you understand the system, you can beat the system.
What if I told you there's a news platform made just for us? Unfiltered, unapologetic, telling our stories from Africa and the diaspora. The African Diaspora News Channel app keeps you informed and empowered from wherever you are at any time. Don't just watch, join the movement. Download the app now and stay connected to the news that matters.
Peace, family. My name is Vicki Dillon for African Diaspora News Channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. As you come in, be sure to come in giving us a big thumbs up, and share the broadcast. That way others will know that you're here. And for that, we say thank you so very much, family. Boy, do we have a doozy today. As I like to say here, I won't be long, but I will be strong. Let me tell you something. This notion of reparations is bigger than just the idea of the proper distribution and transfer of money. Anybody, in my opinion, that is reticent to jump on the bandwagon to ensure that foundational Black Americans, that's that group of Black folks that's responsible for the building, the creation, and the prosperity of these United States, its founding and its sustaining. See, the oppressor did not have the wherewithal. They did not have the mental bandwidth, the physical bandwidth, the intellectual bandwidth to bring into existence a new world. So they stole our resources and they stole us to make that happen. You must pay for that. Now, I'm going to show you a clip here because I want you to show you, even in recent times, with some of the most interesting and really some of the most extreme voices and individuals on the social spectrum, the media spectrum, political spectrums, about why they're talking about the very things that some of your Black leadership aren't. We who are part of alternative Black media, we talk about it, we've been talking about it, and we continue to talk about it. Now, for me, I am first and foremost a spiritual. That is to say, I understand that everything you see came from everything that you can't see. I don't care about your religious persuasion. It don't matter if you believe exactly how I believe or not. That doesn't stop what I just said from being true. And you don't have to be religious or spiritual to agree with what I just said right there. Your modern quantum physicists, your modern scientists acknowledge what the ancient spiritualists, practitioners, mystics, philosophers, scientists, and others have always known. And that is what I just said. Everything you see came from everything you can't see. You know this is true just by dealing with a bee. There is a such thing as a visible spectrum. Because you can't see on the full visual spectrum doesn't mean something doesn't exist. Why did I say bee? How many of y'all know that when the bees are doing their business, pollinating and so forth, they use ultraviolet? You can't see ultraviolet, but you know that buzzing around that they're doing. You know the benefits that they are to the planet has something to do with with their ability to engage with plant life, with the entire environment. And even though they can see ultraviolet, you can't, but you know it's something to it just by observing them. I'm using that small analogy to make a larger point that there's a whole lot of stuff that's going on in dimensions you can't see. And we're not going to sit here and wait thousands of years for you to come to the right conclusion. Now, keep that in mind with this notion of what I'm talking about with reparations. Reparations is not only a political and a financial issue. It's a spiritual matter. And I made that point about the being things that you can't see because a part of the drama that the United States is unnecessarily dealing with. And the reason why some of her issues continue to exacerbate and she continues to produce enemies from within and without, in large part is connected for your failure and your refusal to do right by us. So anybody that's out here that's not understanding why it's important that you cut the check, you are showing that you are a spiritual problem. I'm going to say that. I'm about to say something else. There's a divine unseen court that will allow you to deal with a hell of a lot more than you should be dealing with when you refuse to make right this very old, as some folks even acknowledge, original sin. Now that I've made that very philosophical point, spiritual point, I want you to get ready to watch this clip of Ben Shapiro, a very, very well-known neocon, a very, very well-known pro-Israel voice that goes on the Breakfast Club. He's having a conversation with Charlemagne the God in this instance on the in this clip. They're specifically discussing reparations. And Ben Shapiro, with his funny-looking self, wants to dictate the terms of reparations. Now, how many of y'all know most white folks on either side, Democrat or Republican, or anything in between, including Bernie Sanders, who claims to be an independent? Bernie Sanders is against black folks getting checks for reparations. Y'all know that, right? There's no way you haven't seen my past and recent commentary on him on that. It doesn't matter what the party is, which party it is. None of them are pro. Most of them, the most powerful ones, most of them are not for reparations. We're not talking about speculatively for it, theoretically for it, meaning you agree with it in your head that we should be giving it. You don't see anybody making it a part of their initiatives and their projects to get done. Well, Ben Shapiro is talking to Charlemagne the God, which I have many problems with Charlemagne's funny looking self. And so they're talking about reparations. Most white folks are against reparations, period. But I'm going to explain to you on the other side of this clip why Ben Shapiro is even halfway sort of agreeing to any parts of having, watch this, a conversation. But you can't cash about it. Watch this clip.
Democracy where the best people at any job get ahead. Now, if you're talking about reparations for immediate past wrongs, I think it's a much easier conversation. So I think that if you're in 1968, 1970, and you're talking about what can we do to rectify the problems of Jim Crow and make it right for the people who suffered under Jim Crow, I think that's a really live and interesting conversation, and I think that it's totally worth having. I think that on a sort of public policy level, reparative policies don't tend to be nearly as effective as people want them to be, historically speaking.
They work for Jewish people.
In what way?
Jewish people that receive reparations.
You mean Holocaust reparations, for example, from Germany? So I think that first of all, that there was like a gigantic fight actually in Israel over whether Holocaust survivors should accept reparations from Germany, because the idea was that it's allowing them to expiate their sins of the past, and they shouldn't be allowed to expiate those sins, and it's allowing them to sort of buy off the history for 50 grand or whatever it is. But that is not the reason why Israel has become successful economically. Like, just on a success level, the reality is that cutting people checks rarely makes them more successful from the government. What usually makes people more successful is a determined attempt to become the things that the meritocracy demands of you. Right? So there were no long
I do
scale.
think the U.S. foreign assistance for Israel has helped financially, though.
Well, I mean, the U.S. foreign assistance for Israel actually is a bargain for the United States, because Israel doesn't need the money. I've said this before.
Well,
Israel,
give it to us.
I mean,
we'll take it.
That's fine.
The black community would gladly take it.
That's in it. I
can't speak for everybody.
It's like $3 billion a year. We should point out at this point that we spend, I think, $6 billion a year on our military bases in Japan, $5 billion a year on our military bases in Germany. We spend an awful lot of money that helps an awful lot of other countries. Israel has to spend all of that money, by the way, in the United States on military product. So all of the money that we send to, we actually don't send money to Israel. We send military product to Israel that is made in the United States. And so it actually is a subsidy to the American defense industry. And there is a deal with Israel where Israel does intelligence sharing and also develops its own tech and can't disseminate it to the world. So, for example, the helmets that our F-35 pilots use, those are Israeli developed helmets, like that we can see over the horizon, for example. That's because Israel developed technological add-ons. So the idea that this is sort of like a zero sum, the money goes out, we get nothing back, that's actually not true. You can make the argument that foreign aid entirely should be zeroed out. I think that is not a particularly useful argument, just because sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. Like, I'm by the way, in favor of assistance to Ukraine to prevent Russia from taking over Ukraine. This represents a vanishing portion of our national budget, right? If you're going to talk about like where the actual massive spending is going.
Okay, family, did you hear that madness? I said, family, did you hear that madness right there? Voices like mine are a force to be reckoned with, because I'm going to simplify stuff for you, and I'm not going to let you deliberately and knowingly get lost in the forest. I'm going to snatch you out and say, this is where you are. These conversations are meant to distract and to delay justice. Did you hear what I said right there? We are not even going to spend a disproportionate amount of time on the madness of it all, which all of that was madness. Now, first of all, as a side note, it's madness that Charlemagne the God brought him on when he hasn't even brought on voices like Vicky Dillard. Why? Because someone as outrageous historically, I'm talking about his record being, your black looking bootlicks are willing to give them a sit down before they put on pro-black revolutionary voices like mine. Number two, Charlemagne needs to keep his numbers up. So it's an important part for them to bring these types of voices on. I get that. But Charlemagne is also, while he on the one hand pretends like he's criticizing the Democrat Party, when he's done with the criticizing, he still golds individuals back to the Democrat plantation at the end of the day. And his buddies and guests, like Amanda Seals and Tamika Mallory, will publicly criticize pro-reparations voices and defend the Joe Bidens of all the stuff he's done for black folks, like Tamika did. And Charlemagne will allow himself to be debased by Joe Biden himself. When Joe Biden went on had his interview with Charlemagne a few years ago, when Biden said that you ain't black if you don't vote for him. He did that in the face of Charlemagne. And Charlemagne had no reasonable pushback to that. Charlemagne and the Breakfast Club support voices like the Amanda Seals, who before this last election came out, Amanda, and said what? She doesn't want to hear nothing about no reparations. She said, I don't want to hear nothing about Kamala Harris's prosecutorial record, among other things. So you want us to get riled up about this anti-reparations white man, but you still side with an anti-reparations party and people. You still endorse a Kamala Harris that says she's not going to do anything specifically for black folks, and you lied for her. And every time we call you out on it, you want to be, keep doing cartwheels in La La Land. That is what I want to remind you of, that this is all show. But this show is important because they know that this is a conversation amongst the people. That's why they're trying to commandeer the conversation so that they can delay, misguide, and make you think that they're actually for something, to get you tacitly on their side, subconsciously even on their side, and to see one party and one group worse than the other. But at the end of the day, you got to look at the results you were getting. Now, why am I bringing it up? I want to briefly deal with some stuff that this Ben Shapiro said, the obvious parts. He said that he thinks it's more useful to deal with giving us reparations and having a conversation. Don't forget, he's about just conversation about what's happened to us in recent years. If we were to have a conversation about what y'all did to us in recent years, and when I say recent years, I'm talking about from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s on up, baby, we got plenty of receipts that would be to the tune of trillions upon trillions of dollars that you owe us. But how dare you twitch your hips on the Breakfast Club to determine the limitations and the terms of reparations that's owed to us? And how dare you sit up there and say that what you believe is more beneficial than government handouts? Let me tell you something, you wild thief. Anybody that will tell you that what they think is going to be more economically good for you related to a legal situation is a very real adversary. Now, let me tell y'all something in case you were ever convinced to adopt such a ridiculous notion. That's when I got on Dr. Umar Johnson and other voices long time ago. Anybody that comes out with saying black folks are too sick, we're not smart enough, we ain't ready enough to get all this money. You out of your mind. What are you trying to say? You're saying that the enslaver, the ones that ate our body parts and crucified us, you said that they're more, it should stay in their hands until we're ready. You see how crazy you look right there? More importantly, let me have you understand something. Reparations is a legal issue as well, that involves not only corporations, but the government of the United States, the corporation of the United States. If, for example, family, right now, God is forbid, you get injured in a car accident. And let's say your car is total and you may have some physical ailments. And let's just say after your assessment and after the assessment of your vehicle, it's found that you're owed about $250,000. And let's just say right before you got in that car accident, you just experienced a default on your home. So you end up getting evicted out your home. And let's say when it's time for the insurance company to pay you your $250,000 for your physical injuries, because you may be physically impaired, and for the damage to your vehicle so that you can purchase another one, they owe you $250,000, right? That's what they said the assessment is. But then they start looking at your past, talking about, well, he just lost their house, was evicted. So-and-so just was evicted. So because of the eviction, your past, we're going to ask the courts to deduct $175,000 off of this. You do not get to go do studies and put out wild analysis and commentary on what impact you think it's going to have on the economy if you give us, watch this, what you owe us, thief. The thief doesn't tell the person you stole from what to do with what you stole, thief. It's a legal situation, which is to say, if I decided with $250,000, I was going to go buy $250,000 worth of dollar store Skittles, guess what you get to say about it? Nothing. If I decided that I was going to go blow every single dollar at the casino, guess what you get to say about it? Nothing. If I decided I was going to go start a business and invest some of it, guess what you get to say about it? Nothing. Because when you're owed something, you don't get to sit there and determine what impact it's going to have on the economy before you decide to do what's right. Thief! And I don't want to hear no black person give any kind of justification for what you think we ought to do with it before the government or corporations or certain individuals and entities cut our check. Now, does it make sense to sit down to say, black folks, to ensure continued prosperity and success, maybe we should pool some of our resources together when we get it so that we can ensure long-term and strategic and intentional economic success? Of course, that makes sense as a secondary and tertiary issue. But the primary issue is you better cut me my check, you wild thief. And I'm saying it with every bit of passion because some of you are out of your minds to say anything other than that. What you owe me is not up for discussion. And you pocket watchers don't get to decide what I do with it. That ain't none of your business. You are letting the sick, twisted devils off when you sit there and engage in such conversations. Every group has benefited from our destruction, and every group better cut the check. That is the most profound commentary you're going to ever hear at any time about reparations. And don't you ever let yourself get distracted. I don't care what moral voice, legal voice, political voice, media voice has to say about it. You get to say nothing about what I do with my money when you owe me. That's a wicked thing to sit there and say, well, what kind of positive impact? And you're doing this all at the same time. You're giving your people, Israel, Netanyahu, and Israelis that are not even in that place they call Israel. Y'all give it to the diaspora. And not just Americans. Guess who else? People from around the world have contributed to the German Holocaust reparations. And while we, foundational Black Americans, were still under Jim Crow, while we were still being crucified on crosses here, while you were still destroying our families and our bodies, while we were still going through the back door and sit at the back of the bus, we donned the uniform and went over there to help free you from your oppression, only for you to twitch your hips over here and disrespect us. We fought in every war. We are absolutely uncheckable. And we will not sit there while you spit in our face and continue to get billions of dollars every year from us and tell us what you may or may not do. But even if we were to take your advice and deal with recent history, you would still be out of trillions of dollars. One example, if I'm reading from this article here, Obama. This is a White House archives that I went back and got directly from the White House, the government website. This is dated September 14, 2016. It says, fact sheet, memorandum of understanding reached with Israel. Under President Obama's leadership, the multifaceted cooperation between the U.S. and Israel has reached unprecedented levels. This is particularly true with regard to the security level of Israel. The new 10-year security assistance memorandum of understanding, known as the MOU, to Israel is the most recent reflection of President Obama's unshakable commitment to their security. It goes on in giving details talking about how the total value of the new MOU, which covers fiscal year 2019 through fiscal year 2028, is $38 billion. 3.8 billion per year. It will succeed the current $30 billion MOU signed in 2007, which will expire at the end of 2018. This amount represents a significant increase over the current MOU by every measure and will enable them to acquire additional advanced military capabilities from the United States. It includes $33 billion in foreign military financing, the FMF funds, y'all, and an unprecedented $5 billion commitment in missile defense assistance. This funding will be dispersed in equal increments of $3.3 billion in FMF and $500 million in missile defense funding each year. In practical terms, the level of funding specified in the MOU will permit Israel to update the lion's share of its fighter aircraft fleet, including through the acquisition of additional F-35s, increase its missile defense, and acquire other defense capabilities. It goes on talking about the multi-year missile defense commitment of the MOU. It skips talking about, I'm skipping. It talks about the $500 million in annual missile defense funding under the MOU. It talks about further our decision, it says, with Israel to continue two anomalies in the defense relationship. Under there's a section called under President Obama to date, they've received a record amount of foreign military finances, which stands for FMF. Now, how many of you all know, I read you that from 2000, this MOU from September 14, 2016. That's almost 10 years ago. I'm showing you what that was renewed under Obama. Obama, who came out against reparations for Black Americans. His 2016 agreement with them, as he was walking out the door, that $3.8 billion a year, that's a minimum that we have to spend a year. And a more recent document from 2014 showed that we gave at least $17 billion. From the previous year, from 2024. These are things that we know of that are disclosed. This has nothing to do with our other interrelationships. This is in addition to the tangibles that we gave white Afghans under the Biden administration. This is in addition to the hundreds of billions of dollars that we gave the Nazi Ukrainians to fight a proxy war against Russia. This is in addition to the money we letting the Ukrainians that come here to the United States get from SSI. This is in addition to the hundreds of billions of dollars y'all are giving legal and illegal immigrants as we speak. This has nothing to do with the descendants of the Japanese that were interned for a few years here in the United States. That was horrible. That was terrible. That was wrong. But y'all weren't lynched. Didn't nobody torture y'all. Y'all had to just stay, live over here in the area for a little bit of time. They descendants got checks, thousands of dollars. After we helped fight a war and destroy Europe during the Second World War, we engaged in what's known as a Marshall Plan. That's money and resources to rebuild the country that we consider to be an adversary. That means that the United States and the rest of the world had a mindset that, by golly, we helped to destroy our white brothers over there. So we're going to send the best engineers, the best mind, and by golly, we're going to give them all kinds of money to rebuild what we destroyed. And then they didn't tell you. Read the book, Operation Paperclip, that your government turned around and employed a lot of the top minds from Hitler's groups and integrated them into the United States to help with technological advancement in the U.S. military. Don't you let them play in our face like that. And Charlamagne and the Breakfast Club were not intelligent enough to combat with these facts, which is the very reason why they don't bring on voices like mine. But that tells you everything that you need to know about the black bootleg when they're willing to listen to someone as extreme and as devilish as him. But they will keep us at bay. It's up to us to call them out. But more importantly, it's up to us to make sure that you support voices and platforms and apps just like this one. There's so much more I can say, but I'm about to stop right now. And who knows, I may even do a part 2 because I wanted to continue something else that was being said that I had said actually last time we were together. But one of the things I do want to remind you of really quick when he talks about in recent history. In addition to that being recent history, real quick, there's another report that I gave the team under Obama about Obama. This report, this article is dated 2013. Yes? About 12 years ago. Right? What year is this? 20, yeah. Listen, this report is from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. Guess what the headline says? Report shows African Americans lost half of their wealth due to the housing crisis and unemployment. That report is based, you all, upon the 2007-2008 crash under Obama. What a lot of folks don't know, I'm going to read a little bit of this. It says the state of housing in Black America explores recent housing trends in the African American community, including high rates of foreclosures and failing rates of home ownership, the impacts of these trends for current and future generations, and concludes by advocating and improved policies to address the needs of housing in Black America. The report was commissioned by the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. According to the report, African Americans have lost over half of their wealth since the beginning of the recession. Did y'all hear what I said? Further, African-American home ownership peaked in 2004, indicating that the housing crisis hit the community earlier than the nation as a whole. Since 2007, however, nearly 8% of African-Americans and Latinos have lost their homes to foreclosure compared to 4.5% of non-Hispanic whites at similar income levels. The disparity ratio shows that African-Americans are more than 70% more likely to have been foreclosed upon than non-Hispanic whites. There's much more that I can say about that, but I'm going to stop. Let me tell you what I got to say about this real quick. Before you all sit there and say, well, Obama's hands was tied while he was calling us thugs for protesting torture from police under his administration while he was in office. Obama's administration was calling us thugs. He was bailing out the real Wall Street thugs. And I ain't got time to get into my story and my fight from many years ago. But I'm going to say this. It is a case to be made based upon belief and information and the receipts that have come out now that the crisis that we experienced in 2007, 2008 was man-made in very large part by a lot of top Wall Street folks. And the main culprit that lost more than anybody else during home ownerships were Black folk. And Obama's issue was that he had a provision to where he could have forced a particular agency under his administration to do housing and home modifications so that most Black folks could keep their homes, and he refused. That did not require him to do nothing else with Congress. That did not require him to do anything else but to use his own individual power. And guess what Barack Hussein Obama decided to do? I should say he decided not to do that for us. I gotta do probably a part 2 on this because I've only hit up 2 things. I haven't discussed, even under Obama, he had to sign that legislation that lowered the disparities between crack cocaine that disproportionately affected Black folks. Because even though Black folks, when Black folks were locked up, we were being locked up at extremely a 10-to-1 ratio. It negatively affects us because white folks tend to do cocaine rather than crack. They sniff it rather than smoke it. And your legislators and your lawmakers codified in law and let them get off scot-free or very little time, making sure that you had a 10-to-1 ratio if you were caught doing it. After we know the U.S. government flooded our communities with this drug, and that was connected to the Iran-Contra stuff because your government couldn't get the money that they wanted from Congress to do this illegal war. So instead, guess what your government did? Some of its miscreants. They used the streets to raise the money and use Black families to destroying Black families and use the proceeds from that to fund this little secret war they were doing. That's interrelated to the Iran-Contra stuff. We don't need to go any further than just that with Ben Shapiro's funny looking self. But let me be clear. We ain't about to have no conversation. It ain't nothing to talk about. More on this later. My name is Vicky Dearly Beloved. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it. I'm going to be doing a very, very powerful VIP private webinar this upcoming Monday, September 15th. Go to my website at vickyplanet.com. That's VICKIplanet.com to get information on it. I'm going to be discussing the government's new civil war plans and the real reason why they're making all these threats to invade DC, Chicago, and many others. I can't wait to see you